You know, October's around the corner, so let's celebrate the fact that spooky season is upon us and talk about a ghost type here. So we got Hisuian Zoroark, and while this thing has hair reminiscent to some of the guys I went to high school with, and it would be my mother's worst nightmare to see me with hair that drastically long, Hisuian Zoroark gets better the more you look at it, which is kind of ironic given that its ability and its whole shtick is to disguise itself as other Pokemon. So normal Ghost is its typing, and it's I've got 3 immunities, 2 of which are its own stab types to normal and Ghost, and it's also immune to fighting. It only has 2 resistances to bug and poison, but that doesn't really matter because Hisuian Zoroark is extraordinarily frail. Like, this thing is the epitome of a glass cannon sweeper here, so the lack of resistances doesn't really matter because almost anything can knock over Hisuian Zoroark. So yeah, but it's only got the one weakness here, and that is too dark. So we're kind of banking on our immunities here to normal and ghost. But the nice thing here is having that normal and ghost immunity means we have a built-in fake out protection, so we don't have to worry about necessarily running a covert cloak on this thing, which does open up our item choices for maybe a choice band, a choice scarf, a life orb, a focus sash, a clear amulet. The world's your oyster with Hisuian Zoroark as far as your item choices go. And the nice thing here too is Hisuian Zoroark gets access to both Swords Dance and Nasty Plot. Look at me. Oh god, my hair is awful. But anyways, access to both Sword States and Nasty Plot is amazing because while you would technically want to run Nasty Plot since the special attack is the better stat on this thing, if you disguise yourself as a physical attacker that likes to use Sword Stance, you might not necessarily give yourself away. The whole thing behind Zoroark in general is mind games. Enjoy your mind games, have some fun, maybe set up a Sword Stance and hit this priority Shadow Sneak. That could be fun. So as I mentioned, Hisuian Zoroark is incredibly frail. It has 55 base HP and 60 in both of its defenses, but with its 110 speed, Hisuian Zoroark can outspeed a lot of Pokemon in the Regulation H format, which is relatively nice since Regulation H is a little bit slower than Reg G and Reg F, since a lot of legendary Pokemon that have really high base speed stats, and Paradox Pokemon for that matter, are not allowed. So Hisuian Zoroark should be able to outpace things and do some pretty decent damage at the end of the day, since it has 125 special attack and 100 physical attack. So this thing definitely is a glass cannon. And also, when I was talking about potential items, I forgot to mention the choice specs, which is kind of a bit of a blunder on my end, considering that the choice specs is probably the best choice item on Hisuian Zoroark compared to a choice band. But I don't know, I just have choice bands on the brain, so yeah. I mentioned the choice band and the choice scarf, but I forgot to mention the specs. But specs, Hisuian Zoroark can do a lot of damage. And on top of that, depending on how you want to use Hisuian Zoroark, whether it's going to be a physical or special set, Ghost and Normal is a wicked type combination, since Ghost hits a lot of Pokemon for pretty decent coverage, and Normal is only really resisted by Rock and Steel for that matter. So when you pair the two of them together, well, you get a wonderful combination. Let's jump on in to PokemonDB.net for a quick look at the calculator here. So I have normal type already brought up. So as you can see, there's 87 Pokemon that are completely immune to normal type attacks. But as soon as you throw in the ghost typing coverage right there, well, it goes down to 2 being completely unaffected, with 5 being resisted. And honestly, one of those 5 Pokemon doesn't exist because it's Mega Tyranitar. So Hisuian Zora and Hisuian Zoroark just completely wall normal ghost coverage. But that's pretty decent when you think about it, considering that you can either throw on a third type choice for moves, or you could just let Zoroark's partner just deal with them. And let's be honest, you're probably never seeing a Hisuian Zora or a Poniard on the ranked ladder, so really, you just have to worry about Tyranitar, the Zoroark, King Gambit, and maybe the rare Bisharp, but I don't think you even have to worry about the Bisharp, because King Gambit just kind of remove that from the from the equation right there. Like, I don't know, maybe you might run into a Eviolite Bisharp, but hard to say. Anyways, normal Ghost, main point, it's a good combination because you hit 1,006 Pokemon, counting forms for neutral effectiveness, and then 202 for super effective damage. So right there, if you're running, say, Nasty Plot, Hyper Voice, and Shadow Ball, Hisuian Zoroark is doing a lot of damage. And then depending on if you're running Protect or a third coverage move of choice, well, you can just do a lot of damage. If you want to throw in the Dark typing, you can just remove the Zoroark from the equation from being completely immune to this particular combination. Or if, say, you want to run fighting and you just don't care about opposing Hisuian Zoroark, well, you remove the Tyranitar and the King Gambit lines right there. So you do have the super effective damage. Now, special attacking Hisuian Zoroark does have to rely on either Tera fighting Tera Blast, or it has to rely on Focus Blast, which is a little bit spooky in its own right since, 70 accuracy. But, I mean, gravity strategies are a thing too, or the wide lens item for that matter. You could do something like that, or you could do something like, say, maybe Grass Knot, and while that would remove Tyranitar and the Hisuian Zoroark lines from being resistant or outright immune to this combination, you do still have to worry about the King Gambit. So you could just mix and match. This thing does get access to Flamethrower right here. So if you're okay with Tyranitar being the only thing that resists this combination, you could definitely run a Nasty Plot, Flamethrower, Hyper Voice, and Shadow Ball set. And then on the physical side, while Hisuian Zoroark doesn't really get the greatest physical normal type coverage, you could do something like, say, Ghost and Dark. This thing does get access to both Shadow Sneak and Poltergeist, two of which are decent Ghost type attacks, especially for the physical side, since Shadow Sneak does have the priority and Poltergeist just has a raw base power of 110, and you do get access to Knockoff right here, so that's great for making sure that nothing is completely immune to you right there. And if you wanted to, say, throw in a fighting type move of choice, like, say, maybe Brick Break or Low Kick, well, now you completely remove the not very effective section along with the no effect section right here too. So just some food for thought, but let's jump right back into Showdown and talk about some potential moveset ideas for this bad fox right here, or rather this wonderfully spooktacular fox. I don't know, that was a little bit weird, but we're keeping it in there. But anyways, so what I was thinking here is you could run a Nasty Plot set with Focus Sash, and because this thing is so frail, you don't really have to get that creative with the EVs. You pick your nature of choice, whether you want Timid or Modest on a special attacking set, or Jolly or Adamant for a physical set. Took me a minute to think about that, but anyways, point is, dump your investment into your attacking stat of choice and your speed. Throw your remaining point into one of your defenses or your HP just to make sure you're not wasting it. And you go from there. So if you're going Nasty Plot right here, well, Hyper Voice is going to have you covered on the spread option, and Shadow Ball is going to hit on the single target side, but Hisuian Zoroark does get a signature move in the form of Bitter Malice. Now, Bitter Malice is not a bad move, especially for a move that is a guaranteed attack debuff right here with that base 75 power. This is essentially the special attacking counterpart to Spirit Break, where it's a physical move that lowers the target's special attack. Bitter Malice is a special attack that lowers the target's physical attack. So this could be decent for hitting your opponent's physical attackers and keeping them in check, so long as they're not a clear body or clear amulet set for that matter. So you could remove their attack output by lowering them one stage. So you do have access to that. And as I did mention while I had a PokemonDB.net up, if you don't want to necessarily run Protect and you want to run a third coverage choice, Flamethrower is a great option here, and then that way you can hit King Gambits for decent damage. You can get a Nasty Plot off. You have a nice single target Flamethrower. That's not going to be too bad. If you wanted to double up on a stab option for either Ghost or Normal and have that double stab damage, you could do that. Or you could go Tera Fire on this thing to give yourself stab on Flamethrower, or maybe if you want to have, like, say, a Torkoal or a Prankster Sunny Day Pokemon, maybe Hisuian Zoroark is just on this team as a little bit of extra coverage too, and maybe you're already running a Sun team to begin with. You could take advantage of the Sun with the Flamethrower as well. And as far as other special attacking moves go, that are fairly notable, you do get access to Dark Pulse, which is really nice for hitting opposing ghost types for super effective damage. You can use this or Flamethrower to hit Golden Go for super effective damage, so long as it doesn't terrestrialize away from its base typing. As I mentioned, you do have access to the Focus Blast right there, which is nice with that base 120 power. And if you do get Gravity Up to lower everything's evasion, that could be very nice as well. Grass Knot can be used to punish a really heavy rock or ground type Pokemon for that matter, since Grass Knot does do more damage based off of the target's weight, so that could be relatively handy. You get access to both Psychic and Extrasensory, both of which are decently hard hitting Psychic type attacks, with Extrasensory having a 80 base power and a 10% chance to make the target flinch, while Psychic goes up in 10 base power while having a 10% chance to lower the target's special defense one stage. You also get access to Sludge Bomb to hit Fairy type Pokemon for some really good damage as well. And then you can have Tera Blast. And then we could also just look at the fact that if you wanted to and you're already raising your special attack 2 stages and you just want the coverage or a little bit of disruption, you do have access to both Snarl and Icy Wind to lower the damage output of special attacking Pokemon or lower the speed of opposing sweepers. So you could have that as well as another alternative right here. Maybe you don't have to go for all damage on your special attacking Hisuian Zoroark. You could maybe run Snarl or Icy Wind just to try to debuff your opponents a little bit. If you're going to do that though, I think you should probably switch Bitter Malice out for Shadow Ball just to have a little bit of extra base power right there. Or you could just have the Bitter Malice. I don't know. What do I know? It could be fun too. Anyways, a post-recording Shucko here and pre-editing Shucko here as well. I completely forgot, like a noob, that Tera Stellar is a thing, and Tera Stellar on Hisuian Zoroark could be phenomenal because Tera Stellar gets to keep your defensive typing while turning Tera Blast into a super effective hit for terrestrialized opponents, which means by keeping your normal ghost typing right here, you get to keep your immunities to ghost type attacks thanks to the normal typing. You get to keep your normal type immunities thanks to the ghost typing. So long as you're not going up against a Pokemon with the Scrappy ability, Hisuian Zoroark is going to be really nice. So you don't have to worry about, like, say, fake outs or maybe close combats or Shadow Balls or Shadow Sneaks. You don't really have to worry about some pesky moves that Hisuian Zoroark naturally has immunities to, so that could be relatively handy. And on top of that, Tera Stellar gives you double stab on normal and ghost type attacks, which honestly, it just hits so many Pokemon to begin with, and any coverage move of choice that you have gets a 20% one-time modifier right there. So if you're using a Choice Specs or Choice Banded set, or even a Choice Scarf for that matter, your coverage moves will even have a boosted power the first time you use them as well. Anyways, that's all I just wanted to add to it. Not sure where I'm placing this within the main discussion, so back to the regularly resumed program or the very end, depending on where I put this. Bye. Moving on here too, if you wanted to, you could switch out the Focus Sash for a Choice Specs. And with the Choice Specs right here, now this removes the Nasty Plot setup requirement right here. Now you could maybe run, like, say, Icy Wind alongside Flamethrower, Bitter Malice, or Shadow Ball and Hyper Voice. You could do that. And with the 50% boost to Hisuian Zoroark's special attack, we're going up from 177 to a grand total of 265. So long as your opponent doesn't have Light Screen on the field, you're threatening an impressive amount of damage right out of the gate. So that could be relatively nice at the end of the day. Now, another thing you could do with Hisuian Zoroark is you could also have some redirection, maybe say Mousehold or Indeedee, or even Rage Powder Pokemon like, say, Amoonguss, just to have a little bit of redirection, and then that way Hisuian Zoroark could go for a Nasty Plot to set itself up, or you could just try to make sure that Hisuian Zoroark doesn't take some damage, because really, with Hisuian Zoroark being so frail, if you're not running a Focus Sash, you definitely don't want to take a hit to begin with because you might lose the majority of your HP, which not the greatest outcome for Zoroark for that matter. Now, one thing that I was thinking too is if you wanted to run a Sword Stance Hisuian Zoroark, you could do a couple of different things. And the reason why we're talking Sword Stance as well is if you're using Hisuian Zoroark's illusion ability to transform into another Pokemon, or rather put up that guise of being another Pokemon, if you're using this and you're using a Pokemon that could like to use Sword Stance to begin with, which is why I have King Gambit and Talonflame on here for that matter, you could have some fun here with the natural fake out immunity built into Zoroark. So Talonflame, you don't typically see it with Sword Stance, but with Gale Wings and Sword Stance, Talonflame could be a threat itself. And honestly, you do have to respect the idea that if you see a Talonflame on the field, there could always be that one chance that maybe they're not going for Tailwind with Gale Wings, and maybe they're going to go for Sword Stance Brave Bird, or maybe they get speed already up on the field. I mean, Talonflame is a 126 base speed Pokemon, so it's fast to begin with. Like, one thing I do want to address too is without a neutral nature on, or with just a neutral nature on Talonflame, this thing actually speed ties Hisuian Zoroark, which is kind of wild. So if you don't have a speed benefiting nature, Hisuian Zoroark and Talonflame move exactly as fast. So yeah, your opponent might actually believe it's a Talonflame on the field. And if they see the Sword Stance, well, Talonflame does get access to it. And on top of that, both Hisuian Zoroark and Talonflame get access to Will-O-Wisp. So really, you're not necessarily giving yourself away. Like, I mean, I've ran into regular Zoroark before posing as an Iron Hands, and then seeing a Nasty Plot come out on an Iron Hands, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a Zoroark. Like, time to hit it for some damage now and go from there. And honestly, that's just kind of like my thoughts right here. Like, if you're going for the Sword Stance, some people might not necessarily know the Hisuian Zoroark gets Sword Stance, and King Gambit is probably a better example than Talonflame. They might try to go for a fighting type attack into King Gambit, and with Zoroark being immune to fighting type attacks, well, that could be really spooky for your opponent, especially if you get that Sword Stance off. Now, your speed stat might give you a little bit away with Zoroark posing as King Gambit, but I mean, it is what it is. The one downside, though, is Zoroark doesn't get access to Sucker Punch, but King Gambit does. So, really, you could play some really good mind games, especially in a best-of-3 setup right here. Like, you have the Sword Stance on both Zoroark and King Gambit. You get the Sword Stance, and then now your opponent has to wonder if it's the Zoroark or if it's the King Gambit. And then if you throw a Sucker Punch out with the King Gambit, well, then you can do some really good damage to punish your opponent. So, you could do something like that, which I thought would be kind of some fun food for thought. So going back into physical Zoroark. So Zoroark gets access to Poltergeist, and so long as your opponent has a held item, Poltergeist is a base 110 damaging ghost type attack with 90 accuracy, which is relatively nice. It's a hard hitting stab option, and since you're already boosting up your physical attack with Sword Stance, I thought Knockoff could be great since Knockoff will further increase its damage output by removing the item. So you get that 50% boost right there, and now you're able to hit opposing Hisuian Zoroark with this. So that could be good. And then depending on what you want to do for your last move slot, you could slap Protect here. You could have a Focus Sash on Zoroark, or you could even just have the Shadow Sneak. And then this way too, now you have a little bit of priority. And if your opponent tries to undo the situation for Zoroark and by putting up Trick Room, and so long as they don't have priority on the field, you could get around Trick Room with Shadow Sneak, which could be great. Yeah, just having that boosted Sword Stance Shadow Sneak could be nice. And honestly, if you're running the Shadow Sneak, well, you could maybe even choose to run the Adamant Nature instead of the Jolly right here and go for that 167. Or what you could do too is you could just take Sword Stance out, maybe put Low Kick in here so you have a means of hitting Dark type Pokemon, and then you could run a Choice Band just for the immediate damage output as well. With a maxed Adamant Nature attack stat right here, you hit 167 with the Choice Band giving you that 50% boost. You're going from 167 all the way up until 250, which is still fairly respectable for a nice attacking stat right there. So really, you have your choices available to you whether you want to run special or physical on this thing. Anyways, if you've used Hisuian Zoroark, let me know what you think of it down in the comments below, as well as some Pokemon that you paired with it, and let me know what worked and what didn't work. Anyways, I will see you next time.